Gabbard, U.S. Democratic presidential hopeful, the first Hindu American elected to the U.S. Congress and now the first Hindu American to run for the White House, has spoken out against Hindu-phobic attacks on her by her political opponents and sections of the Western media. She has said that these attacks are un-American as they are in violation of the United States Constitution. She has also taken on mainstream U.S. newspapers and the electronic media for driving an agenda against India, Hinduism, Hindus, and the Indian political leadership too. Over the next 30 minutes, we will discuss Hinduphobia in American politics and how it has crept into American politics and mainstream media, American life as a whole. But before that, a detailed look at how Tulsi Gabbard has called out those indulging in religious bigotry in the United States of America.
The first Hindu American elected to the U.S. Congress and the first Hindu American to run for U.S. President, Tulsi Gabbard, has called out Hindu-phobic attacks on her by some of her opponents and sections of the media in the United States of America. She has gone on record to say that she has been a victim of religious bigotry, with her opponents fomenting fear of Hindus and an anti-Hindu sentiment in U.S. politics. And the mainstream Western media, too, is playing along. In January 2019, in an op-ed for the Religious News Service, she wrote, "Campaign against me, my supporters and donors' profiles, and targets Hindu Americans and ascribes to them motives without any basis. I am called Hindu nationalist. Tomorrow will it be Muslim or Jewish Americans, Japanese, Hispanic or African Americans? My meetings with PM Modi are portrayed as somehow being out of the ordinary and somehow suspect. Headlines covering my announcement that I'm running for the White House could have celebrated this historic first. But some have instead fomented suspicion, fear and religious bigotry about me and my supporters. To question my commitment to the US while not questioning non-Hindu leaders creates a double standard that can only be rooted in religious bigotry. I am a Hindu and they are not. Religious bigotry and attempt to foment fear of Hindus and other minority religions persist." Referring to the earlier political attacks on her, she wrote, "During my 2012 and 2014 elections, my Republican opponent stated publicly that a Hindu should not be elected to serve in the US Congress, and Hinduism is incompatible with the US Constitution. Those trying to foment anti-Hindu sentiment expose the dark underbelly of religious bigotry in politics and must be called out. To advocate voting for or against someone based on religion, race or gender is simply un-American." Tulsi Gabbard has consistently sought to expose religious bigots in the US, driving an anti-India and anti-Hinduism agenda. In an interview to a news daily in October 2019, she said, "Some political opponents and some in the media are resorting to Hindu-phobic attacks and smears. I don't see it as a handicap. I am who I am. Attacks on me may discourage other Hindu Americans from running for office. And there is an unfortunate Hindu-phobic approach taken to Hindus who are expressing their pride." Tulsi Gabbard embraced Hinduism as a teenager and announced in January 2019 that she would run for the White House in 2020. She officially launched her 2020 presidential campaign in February 2019. Bureau Report, DD India.
To discuss Hinduphobia in American politics and whether this is just the tip of the iceberg of a long-running campaign to distort Hinduism, we are joined by Professor Makhan Lal. He is a distinguished historian who's published 18 books and about 200 research papers in national and international journals on Indian history, archaeology and civilization. Professor Bharat Gupta is also with us. He's a cultural analyst, classicist and political commentator, acquainted with the United States for 50 long years. And Priyanka Deo, a Hindu American, a US citizen who is a practicing Hindu. I welcome you all to this special broadcast. I'll begin with you, Professor Bharat Gupta. You are acquainted with the United States of America for 50 years, no less. You are also associated with Tulsi Gabbard to the extent that you know Tulsi Gabbard personally. What do you make of the statements that Tulsi Gabbard has given to mainstream Indian media, the Western media as well, about how she has repeatedly been a victim of Hinduphobia or religious bigotry owing to her religion, which is Hinduism?
Well, there is no doubt about it, that it is all true. And we know that there is a long history of the Christian missionaries attacking Hinduism. There is a long history of certain fanatic Muslim sections portraying Hinduism in a very wrong fashion. And all that is there. But now this is the first time that somebody stands up and claims to fight an election to be the American president. So this whole conflict has come into the fore of the national politics. However, we have to see that at this moment, it is largely a battle within the Democratic Party, because the Democratic Party, which is largely left and consists of left liberal people who have in some way or the other a long history of prejudice against Hinduism. So her political opponents are now using it very clearly, and those political opponents are really very strongly Marxist, if I may say it in political terms.
Fair enough.
And so she has, she's not grinding an axe, she's saying something which is literally true.
Professor Makhanlal, she is calling out attacks on her on the basis of her religion. But is this just the tip of the iceberg? Is the problem far deeper than that?
Yes. Let me first say very clearly that I shall refrain from politics of America and from presidential candidate or others. I will concentrate only on two words, Hinduphobia. Yes, America has been fed on Hinduphobia, not for 1 or 2 days, 2 years, 20 years. I'm in academics since 1988, 89, but really began in 1976. Since then, I have been reading all these things. What is very important to understand is that in American narrative, Hinduism has not been portrayed in a right manner, and this ultimately, erupted into famous textbooks problem, Wisconsin and then California. But what I would like to concentrate on, we must realize that in every society, narrative begins with academia, it percolates down to the lower level through newspaper articles and so on. In America, there are certain centers, very well known. Remember, they are very well entrenched in academia, and that is whether it's Chicago, whether it is Harvard, whether it is Wisconsin. And there are two major organizations in America. One is called American Association of Religion, AR, and other is called RISA, Regional, South Asian religion in South Asia. These two control the whole discourse about the Hinduism, and these are dominated by mostly the people who are either American or Indians who left India, settled, and not only left India and settled in America, left Hinduism also. Okay. So they have become very, a kind of big better.
So they are not Native Americans, you are saying?
No, Native Americans are nowhere in the entire debate. It's a Chicago school, Harvard school, California school, Wisconsin school. They are dominating the whole discourse. And for the last 70, 80 years, all they have done is to completely distort the Hinduism so that it becomes an abuse. Anybody who processes just one word Hindu is enough to indicate what it is all about. And this has been led by no less than Wendy Doniger of Chicago, Martha Nussbaum of Chicago, or you have whole of Harvard School. And also I am not afraid to say that it has been very well patronized by Amrit Sen and other Hindus who left India, settled down in America, and left Hinduism also.
Okay.
So there is a long-term game that denigrate the society, denigrate this religion, denigrate the people, that they must not be able to come up. Because what they are looking at is, Indians are perhaps one of the most influential community, not in terms of politics, not in terms of society, but economically they are the most well-paid people in entire America. Those kind of things are getting built up slowly. So let us thank Gabbard that something was under the carpet, a little bit out of the carpet. She have pulled the carpet out completely, and all the gutter against Hinduism is out on the open, and you are seeing this not only in the textbook, not only in the large number of books published by Oxford University Press, Columbia University Press, Chicago University Press. You just read them, what they write about Hindu religion, what they write about Hindu society, and how New York Times writes, how Washington Post writes. It's all nothing but filth against the Hinduism. I'm not saying India.
So the problem is far deeper, is what you are saying, and you're thanking Tulsi Gabbard for calling out attacks on the basis of religious bigotry. She's at least shown the courage to call this out, not once, not twice, but several times. Priyanka Deo, have you personally or have your friends encountered such religious bigotry in the United States?
Yes, I have. Now, Dr. Makhan Lal, I thank you, because I've grown up in Chicago. I've also gone to Harvard. So first-hand experience right there and then. But I grew up basically in a Christian school, and I faced things, people have been telling me things like, oh, you idolize the elephant god. What's that like? And you know, when my father would pick us up, or when my mom would pick me and my friends up from, you know, some basketball match or just from school, they would make fun of the elephant that we kept in our, or the Ganesh idol that we kept in our car. And you know, it was alarming, because we didn't say anything at the time, because maybe I was too young, or maybe I was just a kid and I wanted to fit in and I wanted to be cool. But I think it stems from the fact that, you know, growing up in a Christian school, I learned all about Catholicism and Christianity. And it was basically this phrase that media has kind of distorted, and all these textbooks that were mentioned before, they've distorted the term idol versus icon. And when you look at Jesus Christ, he is revered to as a complete icon, which is great. You know, he's an icon of truth, he's an icon of religion, he's a beacon of what we should all strive to be and what we should do. But when you look at idol, you look at Hinduism, you look at things like elephant god, you look at things like a t-shirt with a multicolored elephant on it, like, oh, you believe in that, you know, and it's laughable. Basically, that is what the academia has done to Hinduism, that the trickle-down effect is that people are completely misinformed about the religion, and they look down upon it.
Did you see that bias in your textbooks as well in the United States?
I do. I think honestly, it was a joke, because, you know, I had the good fortune of my parents and family. I've been in touch with my family in India the entire time. Now I live here. You know, I had good knowledge of my religion, but it's sad to see the way that things are written. It's absolutely meant to just denigrate the religion. It is, I can say, factual, but it's not written in the same way as any other religion is written. And if you read the books yourself as a practicing Hindu, you'd be able to tell, like, oh, this is not cool at all.
If I can add just one line for you.
Sure.
In entire America, all the textbooks, especially dealing with religion, are written by the people of practicing religion.
Exactly.
If it is about Islam, it is the Islamic scholar will write. If Christianity, Jews. Hindu religious books are the only ones which have been written by either Jews or by Christian or by Muslims.
But why is that the case?
But that is true of India also.
No. Let us concentrate on Hinduphobia in America. And actually, this is because all this is being done under agenda. And I'm grateful that you, from your first-hand experience.
And I also have a master's from LSE, where it's complete Marxist ideology. So I know all about what
he has lived for long, but I have at least 7-8 times visited to some of the best centers, be it Harvard or Berkeley or Wisconsin or even Philadelphia. What is there is unwritten agenda to denigrate this society, this country, to the extent it is possible. And I have no hesitation in quoting the former Chancellor of California University, who is on the record, and I am forgetting his name, but it's all there on the net. He said, since the establishment of American Institute of Indian Studies, which was established in the early 50s, all the professors, invariably all the professors who went to America, they were on the rolls of CIA, and their unwritten agenda was they will do spying against India, their researchers will see to it that it is concentrating on evil part, are distorting it, and the distortion.
So they are essentially CIA operatives. They are not really scholars.
Oh, I'm not saying this. This is being said by California University Chancellor, not even Vice Chancellor.
And I'd like to add
Is that
to
the reason why this problem is very particularly there in California?
No, it is, you see, well, California textbook case became very famous because it was a model for other states later on to follow. And so, But you see, what I would like to bring back things to politics is that while what has been said is entirely true, there is no doubt about that, but when you look at the wider politics of the country, then there, the average voter is not somebody who is going to vote just because Wendy Doniger has written something, or Martha Nussbaum or Michael Witzel has said something. The situation there is entirely different.
What determines the choices? What determines the choices?
Well, it's, you see, the situation is that the average American also sees the most successful Indian. He sees the Indian who is educated, he sees the Indian who is at a very high level of profession, he sees the Indian and largely the Hindu Indian who has been highly contributive to the American society, who has generated jobs for the American society, a fact which Trump admitted when he had the, the whole gala thing with our Prime Minister.
So is this a parallel narrative that is going on, that you denigrate Hinduism, yet
by
hail
some people, yes.
India as an economy?
By some people, yes.
Is one having an impact or the other? Is the bias impacting India's image globally as an economy?
No, I don't think it can go that far.
Okay.
Because, you see, the people who manage economy are the business people. And the business people are very anxious to have greater rapport with India. With the Hindus living in India, the people who manage some of the cutting edge sectors of American society, particularly even in California, they are all Indians. People who are sitting in NASA, 40% of the population is Indian, and people are quite aware of it. Now, when it comes down to practical aspirant for the presidential candidate, then it is primarily a party affair. And it is the Democrats, the Democratic Party, as we very well know, and both of my co-panelists would agree, it is entirely dominated by the liberal left, which is in spirit against Hindu thought.
So do you then agree with what Tulsi Gabbard has said, that such attacks on her on the basis of her religion would deter or discourage other Hindu Americans from running for the White House?
Well, I don't think, as a matter of fact, she is saying this, but I don't think in the long run that would happen. As a matter of fact, the effect would be opposite. And I think it is quite possible that Tulsi Gabbard herself may achieve some advantage because American society is not as prejudiced as a whole as some of the academics are.
Okay, would you agree with that?
Disagree with that completely.
Okay, please go ahead.
I think that, with all due respect, I understand your points, but I think that as an American citizen and as a practicing Hindu, the thought didn't even occur to me that this would, such a thing would be held against me tomorrow if I decide to run for the President of the United States.
Exactly.
I mean, this is a fear that is prevalent now in every young Indian American that wants to run, that wants to attain a leadership position. And I absolutely don't agree with the fact that tomorrow, if we have a leader in the business community, they're going to be fearful of this too. Because as long as we are doctors, lawyers, we take up these positions that are relatively not in the spotlight, not as high profile as Tulsi's is right now, it's fine. But the minute that we lead people, we lead other people, and the impact of this actually, and you were asking Munman a little bit before, what is the impact of this? What drives voters to the polls? It is the hate crimes that happen. That's what they read. That's what they consume. This is what young Americans consume, and it's all misinformed. Now, we had Islamophobia long ago. It's still prevalent, I would say. But Sikhs were attacked as well. And there's a term called walking while brown now that's going around Harvard. Walking while brown, it's in Chicago as well, and probably everywhere else that I haven't been in the United States. It's the worst, and I've grown up in that city. Now, walking while brown, what does that mean? Now, we have Hispanics who are brown, we have Hindus who are brown, we have Muslim people who are brown that are all living in Chicago. All can be attacked because of this misinformation, and that is what voters vote upon, and that is what drives fear.
Professor Makhan Lal, is there a clear bias in the Western media, not just about Hinduism, but about India, about the Indian political leadership as well? We've read headlines like the divider in chief. We've seen a very, very outlandish, outrageous interpretation of the swastik in the mainstream US media. What would you say to that?
I'll come back to it, but permit me to make a couple of comments. which in the beginning I said I will refrain from, and that's the politics and the election. But I'm tempted to say a couple of things. In my view, when it comes to power politics in America, Indians don't matter so much as of now. Their population is only 30 lakhs. Entire America's population is 28 crores. So they are actually...
What about tomorrow, though?
Huh?
What about tomorrow?
No, I'm coming on that.
And the money power.
As of today,
The money
I'm
power.
talking about money power. They don't have, they have per capita income highest, but they are not the most moneyed people in America. These are two very different. They're per capita, they are definitely the highest. Nobody said that, but they are not the moneyed people. Moneyed are billionaires, and they are not in that category. Secondly, what happens in Munmunji, that if you say written words don't matter, and people of America are not going to vote by reading newspaper, I think nothing can be more wrong than this, because the way newspapers narratives finally mold and change the election, we have been witnessing this, at least I have been witnessing this since 1968, when I was a high school boy and elections were happening at that time. So we have to be very careful. Now, when you were saying that whether this bias is so deeply rooted or just the same. Bias against Indian society has been very deeply rooted, and we must not forget, America is not something which was there 200 before. America is all Europe. And what Europe has written in last 150 years, that needs to be seen in context of India, denigrating each and everything Indian. And that began by Macaulay when he says that entire literature of Indian tradition is not even worth a Almira that Britain has, or even one. That kind of thing, narrative has gone on, and the kind of things, as I mentioned, has been involved with American Institute of Indian Studies, American Association for Religion, or Religion in South Asia. All these organizations work in hand and glove and see to it that Indians do not come up and ever they are recognized what they were civilizationally, what was their position in the world committee of the nations. They just want them to be downgraded and remain the image of Bansuri wala, remain the image of Saap wala, snake wala, and all that. And there is a very deep rooted prejudice of racialism. I'm very happy that he used the word, Kamal Mitra was there, he used the word racism, and racism is so manifested in entire white world. And this I am not saying just by sitting in Delhi, having seen 67 countries in the world and quite a few traveling all the time. So I can say that racism is so prevalent against Indians that it's unimaginable.
Because that's about the state of play and the problem in the United States. But can we look at solutions here? What can be done to mount a concerted effort against such distorted interpretations of India, Hindus, Hinduism, the Indian political leadership? Professor Bharat Gupta.
Well, I think what has been said is true, but the situation is not really that bleak. Because the Indian diaspora and the Indian people are socially assertive. It is true that the whole business community does respond. And America is divided between academics who are getting fewer and fewer grants. The universities are shrinking. Then there is a whole lot of social media and the other reality, which is also expanding. And it is there where the Indian people can make a very big assertion. It is there that they can personally expand upon the whole combat. Don't forget that Indians have 900 temples, and it is American society, despite all these kinds of Christian and Islamic jihadi prejudice, that those temples are there. Yes, there are attacks at some times, but the American democratic system does admit of those who can speak out, those who can assert.
The Hindu American Foundation had done a national survey saying that 1 out of 3 children are bullied because of the religious beliefs in the United States.
Well, yes, because that is the social reality. But don't forget the future that is there. That the system is something which allows you to assert itself, and in the last 25 years, situation is improved.
So the scale of the problem is bigger. Is the consensus here, I would say not really the consensus, but 2:1. The scales are tilting in favor of the fact that Hinduism is being denigrated in the United States, and this is the result of a long-running campaign. I'll give you the last word very quickly.
Yeah, very simply, you said how the things have to be set right. First thing, we have to set right our own house in order. The kind of intellectual distortion that has been done in the West, that has to be corrected. Always remember, until unless you correct the narratives, you cannot achieve the goal. And therefore, correction of the narrative, the first thing, should percolate down to the lowest level, and our embassies should be doing a little bit more about projecting India, its culture, its civilization in right way than hosting parties only.
All right. Well, on that note, I'll thank you, Professor Makhan Lal, Professor Bharat Gupta, and also Priyanka Deo, who had to leave us early because she had some preoccupations. So since Hinduphobia is not limited to politics in the United States, it is important to recognize that distortions of Hinduism have been produced, sustained and propagated in textbooks, films, museum displays, to name a few, though Professor Bharat Gupta would not agree as much, penetrating the mainstream media and directly impacting the American public perception of India. A concerted effort is thus needed to counter this vilification of India and its religions so as to ensure the right perceptions and not heavily prejudiced ones go out to the world at large. That's it then in this special broadcast, Hinduphobia and American Politics. Thanks for watching.
दिन भर की सुर्खियों पर नजर, देश दुनिया की 100 बड़ी खबर सिर्फ 30 मिनट में। एक्सप्रेस न्यूज, सोमवार से शुक्रवार सुबह 9 बजे और रात 9:30 बजे, सिर्फ टीवी न्यूज पर।